Hey guys, time for more stories from Aesop's Fables. The Birds, the Beasts, and the Bat. The birds and the beasts declared war on each other. No compromise was possible, and so they went at it tooth and claw. It is said the quarrel grew out of the persecution. The race of geese suffered at the teeth of the fox family. The beasts too had cause for a fight. The eagle was constantly pouncing on the hare, and the owl dined daily on mice. It was a terrible battle. Many a hare and many a mouse died. Chickens and geese fell by the score, and the victor always stopped for a feast. Now the bat family had not openly joined either side. They were a very political race, so when they saw the birds getting the better of it, they were birds for all there was in it. But when the tide of battle turned, they immediately sided with the beasts. When the battle was over, the conduct of the bats was discussed at the peace conference. Such deceit was unpardonable, and birds and beasts made common cause to drive out the bats. And since then the bat family hides in dark towers and deserted ruins, flying out only in the night. The moral of this story is the deceitful have no friends. The next fable is The Lion, the Bear, and the Fox. Just as a great bear rushed to seize a stray kid, a lion leaped from another direction upon the same prey. The two fought furiously for the prize until they had received so many wounds that both sank down unable to continue the battle. Just then a fox dashed up, and seizing the kid, made off with it as fast as he could go, while the lion and the bear looked on in helpless rage. How much better it would have been, they said, to have shared in a friendly spirit. The moral of this story is those who have all the toil do not always get the profit. The Wolf and the Lamb. A stray lamb stood drinking early one morning on the bank of a woodland stream. That very same morning a hungry wolf came by farther up the stream, hunting for something to eat. He soon got his eyes on the lamb. As a rule, Mr. Wolf snapped up such delicious morsels without making any bones about it. But this lamb looked so helpless and innocent that the wolf felt he ought to have some kind of excuse for taking its life. "How dare you paddle around in my stream and stir up all the mud?" he shouted fiercely. "You deserve to be punished severely for your rashness." "But your highness," replied the trembling lamb, "do not be angry. I cannot possibly muddy the water you are drinking up there. Remember, you are upstream and I am downstream." "You do muddy it," retorted the wolf savagely, "and besides, I have heard that you told lies about me last year." "How could I have done so?" pleaded the lamb. "I wasn't born until this year." "If it wasn't you, it was your brother." "I have no brothers." "Well then," snarled the wolf, "it was someone in your family anyway, but no matter who it was, I do not intend to be talked out of my breakfast." And without more words, the wolf seized the poor lamb and carried her off to the forest. The moral of this is, the tyrant can always find an excuse for his tyranny. The unjust will not listen to the reasoning of the innocent. There's another story called The Wolf and the Sheep. A wolf had been hurt in a fight with a bear. He was unable to move and could not satisfy his hunger and thirst. A sheep passed by near his hiding place, and the wolf called to him. "Please fetch me a drink of water," he begged. "That might give me strength enough that I can get some solid food." "Solid food," said the sheep. "That means me, I suppose. If I should bring you a drink, it would only serve to wash me down your throat. Don't talk to me about a drink." The moral here is a knave's hypocrisy is easily seen through. The Hares and the Frogs. Hares, as you know, are very timid. The least shadow sends them scurrying in fright to a hiding place. Once they decided to die rather than live in such misery. But while they were debating how best to meet death, they thought that they heard a noise, and in a flash were scampering off into the warren. On the way, they passed a pond where a family of frogs was sitting among the reeds on the bank. In an instant, the startled frogs were seeking safety in the mud. "Look," cried a hare, "things are not so bad after all, for here are creatures who are even afraid of us." The moral being, however unfortunate we may think we are, there is always someone worse off than ourselves. The Fox and the Stork. The fox one day thought of a plan to amuse himself at the expense of the stork, at whose odd appearance he was always laughing. "You must come and dine with me today," he said to the stork, smiling to himself at the trick he was going to play. The stork gladly accepted the invitation and arrived in good time and with a very good appetite. For dinner the fox served soup, but it was set in a very shallow dish, and all the stork could do was wet the very tip of his bill. Not a drop of soup could he get, but the fox lapped it up easily, and, to increase the disappointment of the stork, he made a great show of enjoyment. The hungry stork was much displeased at the trick, but he was a calm, even-tempered fellow, and saw no good in flying into a rage. Instead, not long afterward, he invited the fox to dine with him in turn. The fox arrived promptly at the time the stork had set, and the stork served a fish dinner that had a very appetizing smell. But it was served in a tall jar with a very narrow neck. The stork could easily get the food with his long bill, but all the fox could do was lick the outside of the jar and sniff at the delicious odor. And when the fox lost his temper, the stork said calmly, "Do not play tricks on your neighbors unless you can stand the same treatment yourself." And that was the moral of that story. The Travelers and the Sea. Two travelers were walking along the seashore. Far out they saw something riding on the waves. "Look," said one, "a great ship rides from distant lands bearing rich treasures." The object they saw came ever nearer the shore. "No," said the other, "that's not a treasure ship. It is some fisherman's skiff with a day's catch of savory fish." Still nearer came the object. The waves washed it up on shore. "It is a chest of gold from some shipwreck," they cried. Both travelers rushed to the beach, but there they found nothing but a water-soaked log. The moral being, do not let your hopes carry you away from reality. The Wolf and the Lion. A wolf had stolen a lamb and was carrying it off to his lair to eat it. But his plans were very much changed when he met a lion, who, without making any excuses, took the lamb away from him. The wolf made off to a safe distance, and then said in a much injured tone, "You have no right to take my property like that." The lion looked back, but as the wolf was too far away to be taught a lesson without too much inconvenience, he said, "Your property? Did you buy it, or did the shepherd make you a gift of it? Pray tell me, how did you get it?" The lesson here is, what is evil won is evil lost. The Stag and His Reflection. A stag, drinking from a crystal spring, saw himself mirrored in the clear water. He greatly admired the graceful arch of his antlers, but he was very much ashamed of his spindling legs. "How can it be," he sighed, "that I should be cursed with such legs when I have so magnificent a crown?" At that moment he scented a panther, and in an instant was bounding away through the forest, but as he ran his wide-spreading antlers caught in the branches of the trees, and soon the panther overtook him. Then the stag perceived that the legs of which he was so ashamed would have saved him had it not been for the useless ornaments on his head. The moral of that story is, we often make much of the ornamental and despise the useful. The Peacock. The peacock, they say, did not at first have the beautiful feathers in which he now takes so much pride. These Juno, whose favorite he was, granted him one day when he begged her for a train of feathers to distinguish him from other birds. Then, decked in his finery, gleaming with emerald, gold, purple, and azure, he strutted proudly among the birds. All regarded him with envy. Even the most beautiful pheasant could see that his beauty was surpassed. Presently the peacock saw an eagle soaring high in the blue sky and felt a desire to fly, as he had been accustomed to do. Lifting his wings, he tried to rise off the ground, but the weight of his magnificent train held him down. Instead of flying up to greet the first rays of the morning sun or to bathe in the rosy light among the floating clouds at sunset, he would have to walk the ground more encumbered and more oppressed than any other common barnyard fowl. The moral of this story is, do not sacrifice your freedom for the sake of pomp and show. The Mice and the Weasels. The weasels and the mice were always up in arms against each other. In every battle the weasels carried off victory, as well as a large number of the mice, which they ate for dinner next day. In despair the mice called a council, and it was decided that the mouse army was always beaten because it had no leaders. So a large number of generals and commanders were appointed from among the most eminent mice. To distinguish themselves from the soldiers in the ranks, the new leaders proudly bound on their head lofty crests and ornaments of feather or straw. Then, after a long preparation of the mouse army and all the arts of war, they sent a challenge to the weasels. The weasels accepted the challenge with eagerness, for they were always ready for a fight when a meal was in sight. They immediately attacked the mouse army in large numbers. Soon the mouse line gave way before the attack, and the whole army fled for cover. The privates easily slipped into their holes, but the mouse leaders could not squeeze through the narrow openings because of their headdresses. Not one escaped the teeth of the hungry weasels. The moral here being, greatness has its penalties. The Wolf and the Lean Dog. A wolf prowling near a village one evening met a dog. It happened to be a very lean and bony dog, and Master Wolf would have turned up his nose at such a meager fare had he not been more hungry than usual. So he began to edge toward the dog while the dog backed away. "Let me remind your lordship," said the dog, his words interrupted now and then as he dodged a snap of the wolf's teeth, "how unpleasant it would be to eat me now. Look at my ribs. I am nothing but skin and bone. But let me tell you something in private. In a few days my master will have a wedding feast for his only daughter. You can guess how fine and fat I will grow on the scraps from the table. Then is the time to eat me." The wolf could not help thinking how nice it would be to have a nice, fine, fat dog to eat instead of the scrawny object before him. So he went away, pulling in his belt and promising to return. Some days later, the wolf came back for the promised feast. He found the dog in his master's yard and asked him to come out and be eaten. "Sir," said the dog with a grin, "I shall be delighted to have you eat me. I'll be out as soon as the porter opens the door." But the porter was a huge dog the wolf knew by painful experience to be very unkind towards wolves, so he decided not to wait and made off as fast as his legs could carry him. The moral being, do not depend on the promises of those whose interest it is to deceive you. Take what you can get when you can get it. The Fox and the Lion. A very young fox who had never before seen a lion happened to meet one in the forest. A single look was enough to send the fox off at top speed for the nearest hiding place. The second time the fox saw the lion, he stopped behind a tree to look at him a moment before slinking away. But the third time, the fox went boldly up to the lion without turning a hair and said, "Hello there, old top." The moral here is familiarity breeds contempt. Acquaintance with evil blinds us to its dangers. The Lion and the Ass. A lion and an ass agreed to go hunting together. In their search for game, the hunters saw a number of wild goats run into a cave and laid plans to catch them. The ass was to go into the cave and drive the goats out, while the lion would stand at the entrance to strike them down. The plan worked beautifully. The ass made such a frightful din in the cave, kicking and braying with all his might, that the goats came running out in a panic and fear, only to fall victim to the lion. The ass came proudly out of the cave. "Did you see how I made them run?" he said. "Yes, indeed," answered the lion, "and if I had not known you and your kind, I would certainly have run too." The moral here is, the loudmouth boaster does not impress nor frighten those who know him. The Dog and His Master's Dinner. A dog had learned to carry his master's dinner to him every day. He was very faithful to his duty, though the smell of the good things in the basket tempted him. The dogs in the neighborhood noticed him carrying the basket and soon discovered what was in it. They made several attempts to steal it from him, but he always guarded it faithfully. Then one day all the dogs in the neighborhood got together and met him on his way with the basket. The dog tried to run away from them, but at last he stopped to argue. That was his mistake. They soon made him feel so ridiculous that he dropped the basket and seized a large piece of roast meat intended for his master's dinner. "Very well," he said, "you divide the rest." The moral of this story is, do not stop to argue with temptation. The Vain Jackdaw and His Borrowed Feathers. A jackdaw chanced to fly over the garden of a king's palace. There he saw with much wonder and envy a flock of royal peacocks in all the glory of their splendid plumage. Now the black jackdaw was not a very handsome bird, nor very refined in manner. Yet he imagined that all he needed to make himself fit for society of the peacocks was to dress like theirs. So he picked up some cast-off feathers of the peacocks and stuck them among his own black plumes. Dressed in his borrowed finery, he strutted lawfully along the birds of his own kind. He then flew down to the garden among the peacocks. But they soon saw who he was. Angry at the cheat, they flew at him, plucking away the borrowed feathers and also some of his own. The poor jackdaw returned sadly to his former companions. There another unpleasant surprise awaited him. They had not forgotten his superior airs towards them, and, to punish him, they drove him away with a rain of pecks and jeers. The moral of this story is, borrowed feathers do not make fine birds. The Monkey and the Dolphin. It happened once upon a time that a certain Greek ship bound for Athens was wrecked off the coast close to Piraeus, the port of Athens. Had it not been for the dolphins, who had at the time been very friendly towards mankind, and especially towards Athenians, all would have perished. But the dolphins took the shipwrecked people on their backs and swam with them to shore. Now it was the custom among the Greeks to take their pet monkeys and dogs with them whenever they went on a voyage. So when one of the dolphins saw a monkey struggling in the water, he thought it was a man, and made the monkey climb on his back. Then off he swam with him towards the shore. The monkey sat up, grave and dignified, on the dolphin's back. "You are a citizen of the illustrious Athens, are you not?" asked the dolphin politely. "Yes," answered the monkey proudly, "my family is one of the noblest in the cities." "Indeed," said the dolphin, "then of course you often visit Piraeus." Yes, replied the donkey, "indeed I do. I am with him constantly. Piraeus is my very best friend." This answer took the dolphin by surprise, and turning his head, he now saw what he was carrying. Without more ado, he dived and left the foolish monkey to take care of himself while he swam off in search of some human being to save. the moral being, one falsehood leads to another.